The legal concepts, we have concepts like duties, legal rights, persons, possession, and ownership. So we are going to just analyze deeply into all these concepts. Clear? So starting off with duty. So a legal duty is an act which is a person has to do or to abstain from doing, and the opposite of this duty, I can say it is right. It is legal right. So in a duty, the criteria of neither of the rights should be applied, nor the wrongful act should be present. Clear? So an wrongful act is any act contrary to the right, rule of right, and justice. So a wrong may be described in the largest sense as anything done or omitted contrary to the legal duty. So consider as it gives rise to liability. Clear? So coming to duty. So as I told you, duty is an obligatory act, and it act opposite of which would be wrong duty, and it is of basically many kinds. So a legal duty, as I told you, is an act exactly which is opposite to legal wrong. So what a citizen is bound to do and what not to be done is a duty. So it is an act recognized as a duty by law and treated for administration of justice. So a moral and natural duty is an opposite of which is a moral or natural wrong. So a duty may be moral but not legal, or legal but not moral. Clear? So we have kinds, as I told you, like legal and moral duty is what I told you now. And this is positive or negative. The third and fourth one is positive or negative duty. So when the law obligates us to do an act, the duty is called positive act. And when the law restricts us to forbear from doing an act, then it is called as negative duty. Clear? And next five, you can see it is universal, general, and particular. So universal. So according to Jenks, a famous jurist, I can tell you, universal duties are those which are binding on all the normal citizens of the community. It binds on the all the citizens of a community. But general duties are those which are binding a specific classes of normal persons. Like particular duties are those which are binding between the persons who have voluntarily undertaken them. So any people, any duties which are binding on a particular group of people which they have opted by themselves is called particular duty. And next is the relative and absolute duties. You can see sixth and seventh one is the relative and absolute duty. So according to Austin, relative duty is one for which there will be corresponding duty. And absolute duty is one which has no corresponding duty. Clear? Also, duty can be primary and secondary duties. That is, primary duties are those which arises or which exist per se and independently of any other duty. Example I can tell you is primary duty is to forbear from carrying personal injury to another. A secondary duty is one which has no independent existence but exists only for the enforcement of other duties. For example, I can tell you secondary duty is a duty to pay a man or damages for the injuries which is already done to a person. Clear? One second. Clear? So next is coming to legal right. So generally there will be difference of opinions and interest among human beings, right? So, but it is impossible to secure all the interest and permit all the opinions in law. So therefore the law recognizes certain interests and reject some interests, right? So that accepted rights are called as legal rights. Clear? So one person's capacity of obliging others to do or to forbear by means not of his own strength but by the strength of the third party. So if the third party is God, then that kind of right is said to be a divine right. Clear? So I have like definitions of various jurists for legal rights. That is rights as defined by Holland. I can tell you right as one man's capacity of influencing the acts of another by means of opinions or the force of the society. So according to Austin, a legal right is where a party has a right when another calls of and others are bound or obliged by law to do or forbear towards or in regard of him. And as defined by Ihering, legal rights, he defines it as legally protected interest. So, but the law does not protect all the interest. Clear? So, as the interest of men conflict with one another, law only apprises interest according to the justice and selects only some interest for protection. So, as I told you, law will not accept the interest of all the human beings. So, it accepts the only the legal rights which is in accordance to the justice, natural justice. Okay, and as defined by Salmon, a legal right is an interest to be regarded as a legal right. It should obtain not merely legal protection but also recognition. So thus an interest recognized and protected by a rule of legal justice. And as rightly defined by Holland, a legal right as a capacity residing in one man of controlling with the assent and assistance of the state, the action of others. Clear? So what are the essentials of legal rights? So what criteria should a legal rights have? Is firstly, I can tell you the owner of the right or the subject of the right. That is the person in whom the right resides or the person entitled to the right is called as the owner of right. Clear? Secondly, a person against whom the right is available. That is the person of incidence, I can tell you. So such a person is called the subject of the right. Okay. And thirdly, the contents or the substance of the rights. That is the act or forbearance which a person is bound or is to obliged to observe in favor of the person entitled. And fourthly, the object or the object matter of the rights. That is, I can tell you, things over which the rights is exercised. And fifthly, it is the title of rights. That is the events by which the rights has become vested with the owner. Clear? So these are the kinds of rights. So we have around 11 kinds of rights, that is perfect and imperfect rights, positive and negative rights, rights in rem and rights in personam, uh, proprietary and personal rights, rights in re propria and in re alinea, then principal and accessory rights, legal and equitable rights, primary and secondary rights, public and private rights, vested and contingent rights, natural rights and legal rights. So perfect and imperfect rights, I can tell you, a perfect right has a corresponding perfect duty. So a duty is perfect only when it can be enforced by the courts. For example, debts within a period of limitation. So that has been the courts recognizes this rights, right? And it can be enforced in the same time with the aid of physical force of the state. So enforceability is a test of a right. So this is what we call this ubi jus ibi remedium. Hope you remember. So where there is a right, there is a remedy. And these are the rights and duties recognized but not under the not which can be enforced by law is what we call it as imperfect rights. So the imperfect rights is rights recognized by law but not enforced by law. Clear? So in case of imperfect rights, law recognizes but it does not comes into enforcement. For example, debts barred by limitation unregistered document when registration is compulsory. So the rights continue to remain valid, but it cannot be enforced through a court. A lapse of time does not destroy the right, but merely bear its enforcement. So example I can tell you is a duty to give charity to poor is imperfect duty, but paying one's debt is a perfect duty. Clear? So next is positive rights and negative rights. So positive rights, I can tell you, it should again it should have correspondence with the positive duties. So positive duty is to do something. For example, I can tell you when law enforces the positive duties of parties in contracts or trust, sales, partnerships, and personal duties, and like marital relationships, etc. Clear? Negative rights are one which is corresponding to the negative duty. So a negative duty is a duty to forbear from doing something. For example, duty not to trespass another man's land or duty not to create nuisance to the others. Right? So positive wrong is something which is a positive act, and the negative wrong is by omissions of an act. For example, when a person has to do a particular act, it is positive, and when a person omits to do that act, that omissions becomes negative wrong. So the law generally consists of both negative duties and positive duties. Clear? And the third one is rights in rem and rights in personam. So the term rights in rem is derived from the Latin word, I can tell you it is jus in rem, which means a right against or in respect of a thing. Okay, whereas right in personam is derived from the Latin word jus in personam. Okay, so it means a right against or in respect of a person. So in case of right and rem, every right involves a real and also a personal relation. So right and rem is available against the whole world, that is against all the persons in a state. It corresponds to a duty imposed on persons in general. Example, right of ownership of property is available against the whole world, and everybody has a duty not to interfere with the owner's use and enjoyment of his property. Right? So right in rem is otherwise called as real right, jus in rem. So jus in rem means a right in respect of a thing. Okay, whereas right in personam is concerned, it is available against a particular persons only. So it corresponds to the duty imposed on a particular individuals. So it usually arises out of contracts. For example, I can tell you a right of a creditor to recovery of a debt from a debtor. It may also be a personal right arising independently of a contract. Right. For example, right to claim compensation for accidental injuries or false imprisonment, defamation, etc. So all these are right and personam. We also have another concept called as jus ad rem, which is mean right to a right, means right to a right. For example, if a person agrees to sell his house to one X, say for example, X acquires a right to specifically enforce a contract, right? So this right is out of the right of equitable ownership in the house. So it is called as jus ad rem. So irrespective whether the original right is the right in rem or right in personam, jus ad rem is always a right in personam. Clear? And the fourth one is proprietary and personal rights. So proprietary rights is like one which constitutes a man's property, right? So any right that has an economic value, that is a right in a land or a movable property or a benefits of contract, etc. And proprietary rights are the elements of man's wealth and have been both economic and judicial significance. So almost all the property rights except few rights are transferable. Okay, whereas personal rights are rights which have no economic value. Okay, example like conjugal rights and parental rights or ownership rights. So all these are rights in a relationship. So thus personal rights are concerned about the welfare of a person and has only a judicial significance. Okay, only a judicial importance. Whereas personal and this personal rights are totally not transferable one. Clear? And next is the rights in re propria and rights in re aliena. So right over one's own property is called rights in re propria. It's called jura in re propria. So right over another man's property is called rights in re aliena. So rights in re aliena in sense it has got some encumbrances, right? It is undergoing some kind of litigations. So sometimes the rights of a person over his property becomes a subject or subordinate to a right vested in another person. So example I can tell you, the right of a landowner may be limited by the right of the way to the neighbor. So in such a situation, the owner's right is not full and he has to make room for the right vested in other person. So such a right vested with the other person is called a right in re aliena, which will have certain encumbrances. Okay, so the general right of the owner is called as the servient right, and when the right in re aliena is called as the dominant right. Okay, so sixth one is principal and accessory rights. So principal rights exist independently, right? So principal rights exist independently of other rights, which while accessory rights are appurtenance to the principal rights. For example, when a debt is secured by mortgage, the debt is the principal right and the security is the accessory right. Okay, so similarly, if a owner of a piece of land has a right of way another person man's piece of land, then the ownership of the piece of land is the principal right, and the right of way attached to this principal right is the accessory right. So thus, the right is the supplementary, accessory right is a supplementary right to the principal right. Clear? The seventh one is legal and equitable rights. So rights protected by courts of law in England is what is called as rights in legal rights. Example right to repayment of debts or right to eviction and lease, etc. are all legal rights. Okay, whereas certain rights which are not recognized as at the common law were protected by the court of equity. So this usually happens in England, not in India. And such rights are called as equitable rights. For example, rights to avoid the contract or to entry in by mistake, entered by mistake, or right by redemption or of a mortgage property, etc. Clear? So next is primary and secondary rights. So the right which arises as a sanction imposed by law on a wrongdoer for his wrong is called sanctioning rights. Okay, they are otherwise called as remedial rights. Example, good example I can tell you is law of torts. Okay, so all the other primary rights are also termed as antecedent rights. So primary rights are usually a bundle of rights enjoyed by any person. Example, a person's right to mortgage, lease, rent, etc. So a violation of the primary rights gives rise to sanctioning rights or remedial rights. So primary rights exist independently, but sanctioning rights have no independent existence and arises only on the violation of the primary rights. Clear? The ninth one is public and private rights. So public rights are the rights vested in the state as the persons possessing the rights are held as representative of the public. Okay, so rights belonging to the individuals are private rights. Example, right to vote is a public right, whereas right of ownership of a property is a private right. Clear? The 10th one is vested and contingent rights. So a vested rights is one which uh, which is essential to vest, that is the right in the owner which have happened. For example, a person transfers a property to Y, who is a living person, and this living person, he will acquire a vested right with a property. Whereas a contingent right is concerned, it is a right which is vested or which is completed one only on the happening or non-happening of a specified uncertain event. Okay, so it is said to be only on fulfilling certain conditions with a specified uncertain event. For example, I can tell you is like a property is given to an infant on attaining majority. So now the infant acquires a contingency in the right in property. Okay, suppose a condition in case is a contingent right, maybe a it is of like condition precedent and condition subsequent. So before the happening of the condition, given condition, or after happening of the given condition. So that is called as condition precedent or condition subsequent. And lastly, it is the natural rights and the legal rights. So natural rights are the rights which are dependent upon the laws, customs, or beliefs of any particular culture or government, and therefore it is universal and it is non-transferable. Clear. So natural rights are considered beyond the authority of any government or international body to interfere. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is an important legal instrument enshrining natural rights to the international law. Okay, so John Locke identified natural rights as being life, liberty, and property, and argued that such fundamental rights could not be surrendered in the social contract to grant power to the ruler. So according to him, there are three natural rights, that is life, liberty, and property. So life is everyone is entitled to live once they are created, once they are born, right? Similarly, liberty. Liberty is everyone is entitled to do anything they wanted to, so long as it does not affect the life of another person. And property rights. So everyone is entitled to own all the properties they create or gain through gift or trade, and if they don't have conflict with their life or liberty. Whereas legal rights are concerned, it is bestowed on a person through a law of a particular political and legal system, and therefore it is applicable to specific cultures and only by the governments. So legal rights may be constitutional, statutory, regulatory, contractual, common law, or even conferred by the international human rights. Okay, so legal rights are almost always controlled by the law, which is created, which creates the right itself or by legal rights and held by others. So legal rights can be enforced in the courts of law against other who has infringed it, right? So the right may be enforced by a court order or injunctioning prohibiting the other person or persons from infringing a right by awarding of money to compensate the holder of a right. Clear? So next is one minute. Person. Legal person. So a person is an entity to which rights and duties may be attributed. So any being which is capable of holding any right or duty, whether it is human being or not, is a person of law. Correct? So kinds of person I can tell you is a natural person, that is who is a living human being. Okay, but before that, even you can look into this slide, that is will is the essence of a personality, and a legal person should be capable of writing a will. Okay, so a person is not necessarily a human being, and slaves are not legal persons, that is in the legal sense, as they cannot have legal rights, and there may be persons who are not even human being. Clear? So according to Salmon, a person is any being whom the law regards as a capable of rights and or duties. Okay, so this is the definition given by Salmon for person. So any being that is so capable is a person, whether a human being or not, and no being that is not so capable is a person, even though he be a man, or persons are the substance of which rights and duties are attributable. Okay, so it is only in respect that persons possesses juridical significance, and this is the exclusive point of view from which personality receives legal recognition. Clear? And this is the legal status of lower animals. That is, the only natural persons are human beings. But the beasts are not persons, either natural or legal. Okay, and they are merely things. So animals are considered merely as things. But object of legal rights and duties, but never the subject of them. Okay, so they are not recognized by law, and law is made for men and allows no fellowship or bounds of obligations between men and lower animal. So an animal cannot also have any proprietary rights. So, but cases in which animals may be thought to possess legal rights is cruelty to animals is a criminal rights. So they deserve not to be treated in a cruel manner, right? So a trust for the benefit of particular classes of animals is valid and enforceable as a public and charitable trust. Okay, example, a provision for establishment and maintenance of a home for stray dogs or broken horses. Okay, next, legal status of a dead person. So how about the legal status of a dead person? Is the personality of a human being commences its existence on birth and it ceases to exist at his death. Okay, so dead persons are no longer persons in the eyes of law. So they have no rights because they have no interest. So without conferring rights upon the dead persons, law recognizes and takes account after the death of a person of his desires and interest when alive. Clear? So the three things in respect of which anxieties of living men extend even after his death, that is his body, his reputation, and his estate. Only these three criteria which will have anxiety of a living man, which will extend even after the death of a person. So the reputation of a dead person receives some degree of protection from criminal law, which was held in Williams versus William. Okay, so next is status of an unborn person. So what in case if a person is in the mother's womb? So the child in the mother's womb is known by a Latin maxim called as en ventris sapere. So unborn person possesses a legal personality. So there is nothing in law to prevent a man from owning property before he is born. Okay, so the law will not prevent any person to own a property before he is born. So his ownership is contingent as he may never be born at all, but it is real and present ownership. Okay, so no testator. So testator is one who writes a will. So no testator can direct his fortune to be accumulated for 100 years and then distributed among his descendant. So no person can write a will which will only come into force after some 100 years. So it is only for the present human beings who are in existence, and even a child in a mother's womb is considered to be a person in existence. So to what extent an unborn person can possess personal and proprietary rights is somewhat unsettled question, and all rights of unborn person, whether personal and proprietary, so all the contingent on his birth as a living human being. Okay, so a posthumous child may also inherit, but if he dies in the womb or stillborn, his inheritance fails to take effect and no one can claim through him. Okay, and next is legal status of a minor. So according to law, minor is a natural person and also a legal person. So he can become an agent under law of agency, and he can be admitted to the benefits of partnership under Partnership Act. He is entitled to fundamental rights and basic human rights, but his disabilities are he cannot enter into a contract, right? And he will be uh, he cannot vote nor marry legally, right? And he cannot also write a will. So all his legal acts and property rights are entered through his natural or legal guardian. Clear? So next is legal status of an unincorporated associations. So a social club, professional body, trade union, society, etc. comes under the category of unincorporated associations. So it is represented by a total number of members constituting it, and it is immaterial about its size, no matter how much ever the number of persons are. Okay, so the rules of unincorporated associations constitute the basic contract for all their members. Okay, so the property owned by it is a joint property of all its members. So the conduct of members is governed by its own rules. But however, the expulsion of members are regulated by legal rules and the rules of natural justice. Clear? Next is the legal status of a Hindu joint family. So a Hindu joint family is created by sui generis, that is a birthright of a legal person. So the Karta, who is the head of the family of a Hindu joint family, is a representative and can acquire, own, enjoy and dispose of property, and he can act on behalf of all the members in his family. Next is legal status of a state, which is very important. The state is a large social organization and is regarded as a sovereign. So it owns a huge assets and performs various functions to her subjects. So whether a state is a corporate personality or not, or whether it is recognized as a legal person by law or not, are the important questions to be decided. So Article 300 of the Constitution of India provides that the Government of India may sue or be sued in the name of Union of India, and the government of each state may sue or be sued in the name of the state. So in India, the state is a legal persons. Clear? So next we have kinds of persons. So we just have two kinds of persons, that is either natural person or legal or juristic person. So a natural person is a living human being. So as I told you, and all the human beings should is not expected necessarily that they must possess legal personality. Whereas legal or juristic persons are concerned, it is an entity or a subject matter to which the law attributes legal personality. So generally, legal personality is granted to all human beings living within the territory of the state. So the law creates legal person by personifying some real things, but personification does not always signify like legal personality. Clear? So next is theory of corporate personality. So legal personality is an artificial creation of law. And entities recognized by the law are capable of being parties to the legal relationship. So a natural person is a human being, but whereas legal persons are artificial persons such as corporation, which is created by law and given certain legal rights and duties of a human being. So a being real or imaginary who for the purpose of legal reasoning is treated more or less as a human being. Okay. And next is theories of juristic personality, that is which is otherwise called as fiction theory. So this theory was forwarded by Savigny, Salmon, Koch, Blackstone and Holland, etc. So according to this theory, the personality of a corporation is different from that of its members. So Savigny regarded corporation as an exclusive creation of law, having no existence apart from its individual members who form the corporate group and whose acts are attributed to the corporate entity. Clear? So as a result of this, any change in the membership does not affect the existence of the corporation. And it is essential to recognize clearly the element of legal fiction involved in this process. Clear? And next is the concession theory. So this theory is concerned with the sovereignty of the state. So it presupposes that corporation as a legal person has a great importance because it is recognized by the state or the law. So according to this theory, a juristic person is merely a concession or creation of the state. But nonetheless, it is obvious that while the fiction theory is ultimately a philosophical theory, that a corporation is merely a name and thing of the intellect, the concession theory is indifferent to the questions of the reality of the corporation in as much as it focuses only on the sources, that is the state, from which the legal power of the corporation is derived. And next is the group personality theory or realist sociological theory. And this was propounded by Johannes Althusius and carried forward by Otto van Greg. So this group of theorists believe that every collective group has a real mind, a real will and a real power of action. So a corporation therefore has a real existence. So irrespective of the act, whether it is recognized by the state or not. So the main defect of the fiction theory, according to the realist jurists, are the ignorance of sociological facts that evolved around the lawmaking process. The next theory is the bracket theory or the symbolist theory. So this theory was propounded by Rudolf Ritter von Ehring. So according to Ahering, the conception of corporate personality is essential and is merely an economic device by which we can simplify the task of coordinating the legal relations. So hence, when necessary, it is emphasized that the law should look behind the entity to discover the real state of affairs. And this is also similar to the concept of lifting the corporate will, which is governed under the Companies Act. Okay. The next theory is purpose theory, which is otherwise called as theory of Zweig-Vermeulen. So the advocates of this theory are Ernest Emmanuel Becker and Alois von Brins. Okay, so this theory is also quite similar to the fiction theory, and it declared that only human beings can be a person and have rights. So this theory also said that a juristic person is no person at all, but merely a subjectless property destined for a particular purpose. So there is ownership, but no ownership. So thus a juristic person is not construed around a group of persons, but based on the object and the purpose. Okay, so next is Kelson's theory of legal personality. So according to Kelson, he said that there is no difference between legal personality of a company and that of an individual. So personality in the legal sense is only a technical personification of a complex of norms and assigning complexes of rights and duties. So advantages of incorporation. So all these theories are towards the legal personality, and the incorporation of these theories can tell you the advantages are collective ownership and collective action are cumbersome in law, and common interest vested in them, and to have act commonly in the management and the protection of that interest. An independent corporate existence and successive existence, and owing, enjoying and disposing of property, and the freely transferable shares. Okay, so next concept is the possession, legal possession. So possession literally means possession is the visible expression and the which is main evidence of the ownership. Okay, so possession is usually presumed to be the owner of the possessed thing. So it literally means any physical control over a thing or an object, right? So it expresses the closest relation of the fact that can exist between a thing and the person who possesses it. So in law, possession means it includes not only physical control over a thing, but also an intention to exercise that physical control. Okay, so as rightly defined by Sir Frederick Pollock, in common speech, a man is said to possess or to be in possession of anything of which he has the apparent control, or from the use of which he has the apparent power of excluding others. And as defined by John Salmon, possession is the continuing exercise of a claim to the exclusive use of an object. Okay, so the categories of possession is, we have two categories, that is possession in fact and possession in law. So possession in fact, which is otherwise called as corpus possessionis. So possession in fact is the actual or physical possession. So it is a physical relation to a thing. So it is in fact observed by others. That is, the fact is that possessor exercises claim of exclusive use. Okay, so he has got the physical control and exclusive use of the particular property. So the two elements of possession in fact are the relationship of a possessor to the other persons or to a third persons, and the relationship of a possessor to the thing possessed. Clear? And the second one is possession in law, or animus possidendi. So possession in law means possession in the eyes of the law. So it means a possession which is recognized and protected by law. So it is a mental element necessary to constitute possession. So the animus possidendi must have exclusive claim. That is, the third persons should be excluded from using it. The mental element need not amount to the ownership, but the mental element need not have legal right, and it may be illegal also. So the animus possidendi need not be specific and particular. It may be general also. So the mental intention need not be over one's own property. Clear? So next is modes of possession. So how can we acquire the possession of a property? Is first one is by taking it. So taking implies an act exclusively on the part of the person who physically takes the possession. So it is an acquisition of the possession without the consent of the previous possessor. So it is a possession without the consent of the possessor. So sometimes it is said to be unilateral act also. So the transferee acquires the possession without the knowledge or the consent of the former. So the possessor of the thing, that is usually possessio civilis. So it may or may not be lawful. If it is lawful, then it is a legal possession. That is possessio juri. Okay. And next is delivery. So not just by acquiring a property, it is also the delivery of the possession should be given to that person. So the delivery completes voluntary act from one person to another person. So the transferor gives actual possession to the transferee, and it is usually a lawful mode of possession. So delivery may be actual or constructive. In actual delivery, the thing is to be physically delivered. Okay, so next is the kinds of possession. That is, again we have like two kinds, that is de facto possession and de jure possession. De facto possession is one which exists where the things is in the immediate occupancy of the party. Okay, so the person in de facto possession has a physical control of the thing to the exclusion of the others, and has animus and corpus over the material object. So de facto possession may be described as the actual possession. Okay, whereas a de jure possession is, it can be described as the possession in law. So de jure possession exists only when the person claims a third party right as his own in the natural, normal, legal manner by occupying a thing without any dispute as to his legal right to possess and to enjoy the thing. Okay, so a legal possession may exist with or without the property in the possession. So in case of de jure possession, it is just possible that a man, that I have ceased to live in a house but without intending, and to abandon it for good as the owner of the house. Clear? Apart from de jure and de facto possession, we also have mediate possession and immediate possession, corporeal possession and incorporeal possession, adverse possession and constructive possession. Okay, so mediate possession is, it is a possession of a thing through another. This either through his friend or servant or for agent. So as a thing remains in a possession with another, the possessor has a lesser degree of physical control over such thing. So as the illustration given in the slide, so X has a car which he lives with his driver. So the possession of the driver will be immediate, whereas the possession of X will be mediate. Okay, so this is what is immediate possession, which is also called as direct possession. So immediately, so illustration again is given. So X has a car and he keeps in his garage. So this he constitute like he has an immediate possession over the thing. And this is corporeal possession, is those things which are having physical or material existence, wherein the direct relationship with the thing are possible. For example, House as a physical existence which can be perceived by our senses. That is, we can touch it. Okay, so the possession in the house therefore is a corporeal possession. And it is the possession of the material things. It includes all the movables as well as the immovable things like car, book, pen, etc. Incorporeal possession is where the things are intangible, that is, which we cannot touch or which we cannot feel by our senses. So these are the things which do not have physical existence and therefore cannot be perceived by our own senses. So therefore, possession in respect of this thing is known as incorporeal possession. For example, copyright, trademark, patent, goodwill, etc. Adverse possession. So this is a negative possession in fact, which means holding the land of his own on behalf of some other person. So if adverse possession continues peacefully and undisturbed for number of years, then he can claim ownership and the true owner's right, that is, it will get extinguished. So when one person holds a property for number of years without any interference or disturbance, then that is called as adverse possession. Constructive possession. Now, constructive possession is not an actual possession, but it is a possession in law and not possession in fact. So, according to Pollack and Wright, it is a possession which arises only by the construction of law. So, the delivery of keys of a building is a good example. Okay, and next is the possessory remedies. So what are all the laws in India covers the rights of possession of a property? So we have like various different laws which governs about this possession rights. So firstly, under section 110 of Indian Evidence Act, 110 of Indian Evidence Act, which provides when any question is whether any person is owner of anything of which he is shown is to be in his possession, the burden of proving that he is not the owner is on the person who affirmed that he is not the owner. Okay. Next is the possession, even if it is wrongful, is a good title against the whole world except the true owner. Okay. So thirdly, is being governed under section 47 of Sales of Goods Act. That is the right of a seller to lien. The seller, if unpaid seller is, and if the possession is still with the seller, he can retain the goods. Okay. And next is according to section 170 and 171 of Indian Contract Act. That is the bailee too has a right to lien the goods bailed to unless he is paid remuneration by the bailer. Till then he is entitled to keep the possession of the goods. And under section 378 of IPC, possession is an essential element, and even though the possession was wrongful and the possession of such thing is taken without the consent of the possessor with a dishonest intention. And the possession is protected as a part of law of torts also. So law protects possession not only from the disturbance by the force, but from the disturbance by the fraud. The protection thus afforded as a part of the law in torts. Okay. And next is possession. So finally, I conclude that possession is the most basic relationship between a man and a thing. And possession is a prima facie as a proof or an evidence of ownership. And there is no fixed or precise definition of possession because it is a legal and factual concept as well. And the four essentials of possession are the subject matter of the possession, physical control, intention, and the knowledge. And the lastly, it is about the ownership. So ownership means a relation of a person with a right vested within himself. Okay, so it is a right towards a particular thing. And you can see in this slide all the kinds of the right which we already saw in legal rights. That is proprietary rights, personal rights, right in rem, right in personam, right in re propria, right in re aliena, principal rights, and accessory rights. And this also applies to the liberty, power, immunity, etc. So as defined by Salmon, the right of ownership is a material right as a general, permanent and inheritable right to the use of the thing. And defined by Austin, he says ownership as the right available against the whole world, indefinite in the point of the user, unrestricted in the point of disposition, and unlimited in the point of disposition and point of duration over a determinate thing. Okay, so these are the types of ownership you can see. That is mainly it is divided into corporeal and incorporeal ownership and sole and duplicate ownership. So corporeal ownership is the subject matter of the ownership, which is divided into corporeal ownership and incorporeal ownership. So when the ownership is of a material thing, example like lands, goods, etc., it is corporeal, that is which we can touch. But when the ownership is with regard to the immaterial things like reputation or domestic relations or trademark, etc., that is which we cannot touch, is incorporeal ownership. Okay, so coming to sole ownership, it is again classified into co-ownership, trust and beneficial ownership, legal and equitable ownership, vested ownership, and contingent ownership, and lastly, conditional ownership. So co-ownership is again classified into joint ownership and ownership in common. Uh, so when the ownership is shared by more than one person, that is called as co-ownership. But two or more persons may be at the same time have ownership of the same thing, which is vested within them, and that is known as joint co-ownership. So this is applicable seen usually in Hindu joint family. Okay. But on the death of the co-owner, the whole right goes to the other co-owner and not to the right of the legal heirs. Okay. And ownership in common is it is a common in business or even the after the death or deaths of a owner, I can say the whole right goes to the legal heirs and not to the other co-owners. Okay, so trust and beneficial ownership is where a trust has been created and a trustee is being appointed to administer the property, and he cannot destroy the property but he may administer the property. The interest or benefit arising from the trust is usually enjoyed or used by some other persons called as the beneficiaries. So the trustee or the beneficiaries are the duplicate owners of the trust property. Clear? And next is the legal and equitable ownership. So it exists only in England and not in India. And if ownership is recognized by law, it is legal ownership. And if it is not recognized by law, it is equitable ownership. So vested and contingent right is similarly as what we saw in vested and contingent rights. That is whether the title of the property is complete and whether the ownership is vested, and it is vested is in sense like it is both inheritable and also it is transferable. And vested ownership is again classified into vested in possession and vested in interest. Okay, and contingent ownership is again where the title to a property depends on the happening of some future uncertain event, which is again divided into condition precedent and condition subsequent. And conditional ownership is something like ownership which happens under certain conditions. Clear? Lastly, moving on to modes of acquiring ownership. So how can a person acquire ownership is either through possession or prescription or agreements or through inheritance.